There are over 500,000 kids in foster care across the United States, and making sure they're well taken care of takes a village. I'm Erin Lindstrom, and this is Foster Care Aware, a production brought to you by Tidewater Friends of Foster Care with support from the Barry Robinson Center. If you've had it on your heart to become a foster parent, volunteer, donor, advocate, or just want to learn more, you're in the right place. For more information on how to move forward, head to fostercareaware.org/next steps. And now I'm thrilled to share today's segment with you. Hey there, I'm Erin Lindstrom, and I am joined by Audra Bullock, the president and founder of Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, and Lakysha Laing, a member of the board of directors for TFFC and a former foster youth who was adopted by her foster family. Lakysha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are really excited to just chat and kind of get to know you, hear a little bit about your story. So to kick us off, would you mind kind of introducing yourself to our viewers and letting us know a little bit about you?
Absolutely. So my name is Lakysha Laing. I am the Director of Tech Support at Cox Communications. In addition, I am the president of the Namick, Virginia chapter, which is focused on diversity and inclusion for communications professionals. I am an avid traveler. I have been married to my husband for the last 7 years. We have 2 children, and he is an artist, a visual artist that travels around the world, and I go with him.
Amazing.
Fantastic. So Lakysha, you and I met you reached out looking for opportunities to give back, as many former foster youth do. I think it's got to be somewhere in the upper 90 percentile that youth that make it through foster care come back to pay it forward to other kids in special ways. And you reached out to us in our organization, and we had a wonderful meeting, and then we connected, and you joined the board, and you shared with me your story, and I think it's an incredible story. I was wondering if you might share some of your personal story with our viewers.
Absolutely. So from what I can recall, and also based on what has been told to me throughout my life, I was a twin, and I had an older brother, and we were living with our mom. And my mom had some struggles with drug addiction, as well as taking care of us. And she ended up leaving us in the home of a woman that she had met that day. Fast forward later on into that day, the woman ended up drowning and killing my twin sister in scalding hot water. So my brother and I ended up being placed into foster care because my mom was nowhere to be found. And we stayed with the Grant family. So Naomi and James Grant fostered us throughout our childhood, and eventually we became adopted into the Grant family.
Wow. That is so incredible, and it's so amazingly tragic. And the fact that you've made it through to become a productive, healthy adult with a family of your own, with all of that trauma history, is just amazing. Kudos to you and your resilience, and the family who you ended up with. I know that there are a lot of children that don't get so lucky to have a family. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about some of the strengths that your family brought to you that are important, you think, that all foster families should bring to the table.
Absolutely. One of the things that I believe is the reason that I've been able to be as resilient and strong as I have been, is the fact that my mother and father instilled in all of us never to give up. So even though we were in the situation we were in, even though we often felt like we didn't have our own family as we were going into this, they always found a way to make sure that we felt that we had a family. They did things with us. We went to summer camps. They ensured that we were, so if I could backtrack a little bit, not only did they adopt myself and my brother, but my parents adopted 3 other boys as well. So we had a family of 5 adopted children, and then they had 4 children of their own. So we were a large family of 9.
Incredible.
So even with that large family size, my parents always ensured that we went to church. They ensured that we did our schoolwork. We were involved in a lot of extracurricular activities, and they kept us in line. They made sure that we were doing the things that we needed to do in order to be helpful citizens in the world.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned earlier that you wished you had had a peer mentor. Tell us more about that. What does that mean to you?
So growing up in a foster situation and even after being adopted, you also still end up having a feeling of not belonging. You have a feeling that you're still different. And what I would have liked to have, as I think back on my childhood and being an adult today, what I would have liked to have was someone who was of the same age as me, who maybe has gone through foster care and or adoption, that I could relate to, and share stories, get advice based on things that they would have experienced as well, so that I felt like I had someone I could talk to. We were assigned a psychiatrist. I believe that's a part of the process at the time, was to assign the family with a psychiatrist. And when you think about what that does, it almost puts you in a position to not really tell everything because you're fearful of what might be said back to the family after you've had that session. But if I had a peer mentor, I could go back to them and say, hey, I just went to that session. And you know what? I didn't want to tell them about this, but can I talk to you about this?
Mm-hmm.
And it would allow me to have an outlet for some of the things that I believe that I bottled up, that I probably should have said something about, but I was afraid or nervous to say anything to the psychiatrist about for fear of what might happen if I did.
Right. And Lakysha, I know that many adoptees struggle with adoption, and that's a foreign concept to prospective adoptive parents. Can you tell us some of the emotions around adoption that brought you angst at the time?
Yeah. So when you start off as a foster child, it's known, right? And there's this perception that you're here for a short amount of time. You are here because there's some hope that you will be reunited with your family. And eventually, when you do get to a place where that's not going to happen, you do feel angst about, okay, so if I do end up getting adopted by this same family, will they still treat me the same way that they've treated me, with this perception that I was only going to be here for a short amount of time? Will I get the love and the nurturing, and will they still want to be a part of my life once I am adopted? Or would they feel like I'm coming in on their family when it should have only been temporary from the beginning? So
Right.
I think that foster parents should be very aware of the impact of making that decision to transition to adoption with the same child, and what that may or may not do to the dynamics of the home. And then how do you ultimately work through it so that all parties involved still feel supported, but also feel more cohesive?
That's right. That's a whole nother transition that we don't necessarily think about. We, especially I think as adults looking at children going through the process, we're like, oh, we're keeping them, they're doing the same thing. But the truth is that transition is huge and really life-changing, even though on the outside, we're not seeing like another house move or packing up your bags, but it's still a huge change.
Yes.
Would you say, like, are there any things to kind of, to soften that time and to soften the transition? I imagine that kind of communication, and actually, because as a child, you knew all of this was going on and you were kind of aware of your feelings throughout, right?
Yes.
So
but what I wasn't aware of was what was happening behind the scenes, right? So for me, I feel as if we were shielded from all of those intricate details about timing. All I remember is the next day waking up and being told that we've been adopted into the family.
Wow.
Right? So I was never brought along into the process of what that would look like. And so that sort of helps to align with foster parents should be okay and open to sharing parts of the process. Because without having that intricate understanding, it felt foreign to me. when it finally did happen, I don't know if I really took time to celebrate the fact that I was now going to be a permanent part of someone's family, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an important point to make too, because again, I think a lot of parents approach this as a very happy, joyful time in their lives, and also try to shield children from a lot of the court bureaucracy around adoption, because there's a lot of that. But you know, there is a second side to it, and there's always, it's like a diamond, and you always have to turn it a little bit and look through another facet to see the entire stone.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. I think just the fact that we have to hold space for the children that are going through this process in its entirety, and even the things that we think are good are still going to be challenging for them.
And even things that you think that they shouldn't know, I would challenge you to really ask yourself, should I tell them? Because ultimately, if later on they find out different pieces about the process, because trust me, they're going to Google it. They're gonna look to friends. They're gonna ask questions. And I think as foster parents, you would rather they ask you than to find out things from other people that may or may not be 100% accurate. And then they end up forming these visions or thoughts in their mind that may not be accurate if it had only come directly from the foster parent.
Yeah.
So Lakysha, how old were you and how old was your brother when you were adopted?
So we went into foster care. I was 3, and I believe we ended up getting adopted by the time I turned about 13. And my parents
So
were well into their 50s and 60s. So my dad ended up living to be 101 years old.
Wow.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and I got married on his 99th birthday.
Wow, that's incredible.
So with that came a whole other set of challenges that my brother and I had to deal with people seeing us out in public, going to the stores, and the first response is, oh, those are your grandparents? No, that's my mom and my dad, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about fostering that brings camaraderie among foster parents, is that our families look very unique, and it's nice to have some normalcy to be around other families that also look unique, and you get lost and you feel normal again, you know? So I totally get that. And but it must be hard for kids because you know, you're identified, and many of our children or families are multiracial, and so it's easy to identify that, you know, we're a different kind of family, and so you know, that's got to bring its own challenges. What would you say are the most important things that, you know, a prospective parent should know? If you can boil them down to a couple of points, what would you say is most important that our audience take away?
So if I were to leave with some important points, I would say, one, as a foster parent, it's important that you devote, even if it's just 5% of your time, find that one thing or 2 things that you can do just with that child. And it's you and that child's time. It's that me time that we look for. Even if it's just walking out to the front of the house to grab the mail out of the mailbox, or if it's to run to the grocery store to get some milk. Find what those small moments are to build that strong relationship and that bond with that individual child, because I know some of the households also have other children that, you know, are being introduced to a new child into the home. So my suggestion would be to try to find a small amount of time to give that one child that individual attention. It goes a long way. They'll cherish those specific moments and look forward to those moments, no matter how small it is. The other thing I would say is, when people hear foster care, a lot of people shy away from wanting to find out more and find out what is really entailed in this process. And for organizations such as the Tidewater Friends of Foster Care, many of these organizations have great support systems. They have great processes. And so understanding what is entailed is one side of it, but also take time and understand who has your back through the process. Understand who's behind the scenes, making sure that your paperwork is being processed properly, making sure that the programs that are being offered are being looked at and fostered through, the relationship that you have with them. It's not as scary as some people believe it is. I think people don't take enough time to really understand what goes into ensuring that a child goes into the right home, but also the support that comes with it.
I think one of the things that people get, and even through this conversation, it's almost like bubbled to the surface for me, is just thinking about how people who are considering being parents feel like they have to be perfect.
Right.
And I think part of like what you're like illuminating just by sharing your story is that this really isn't about being perfect. It's about like being open, right? And like
being willing,
sharing your life and figuring it out as you go.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, being willing. That's all it takes is a heart that has will, and anything else could be accomplished through that.
I love that.
Yep. That is just so totally amazing. We so appreciate you being with us to share your story and your points in foster parenting. I think they're exceptional. And I so appreciate you joining our organization and being on our It's just fantastic. Thank you so much, Lakysha, for all you've done.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And a big thank you for listening. Foster Care Aware is all about spreading the word about how we can help the kids who are in care in whatever capacity works for you. Tidewater Friends of Foster Care is here to help support you through the journey. Whether you want to be a foster parent, volunteer, donor, or advocate, head on over to fostercareaware.org/nextsteps to learn more.